They told her she wasn't the right fit. Not because she lacked the skills. Not because her resume wasn't impressive. But because when she walked into that glass building, they saw something that made them uncomfortable. Her. A black woman, confident, poised, and unapologetically herself. The kind of person who didn't shrink to fit in. The kind of person they didn't expect to own the room. And certainly not someone they planned to give a corner office to. Her name? Ava DeClaire. She had been preparing for this role her whole life, top of her class in business school, worked 16-hour shifts to pay her tuition, and even interned for companies that barely remembered her name. Still, Ava kept going, because she believed in a bigger dream. She believed that if she worked hard, stayed disciplined, and carried herself with grace, the world would eventually open the doors she knocked on. But the world, especially the corporate world, doesn't always work that way. "I'm sorry," the HR manager said, without looking up. "We've decided to go in another direction." Ava sat there, holding her breath, her fingers slightly trembling, not because of fear, but because of familiarity. She had heard that line before. But this time, something cracked inside her. It wasn't just rejection. It was the moment she decided, "I'll stop asking for permission to exist in rooms I'm meant to own." She walked out of that building, but not out of hope. No, something bigger was about to be born. That no was about to birth her new yes. Ava took the long train home, staring out the window. Her reflection looked back, tired but defiant. She pulled out a notepad from her bag, the same one she used to sketch ideas during long commutes. This time, she wrote 4 words. Buy the whole company. It sounded ridiculous. Insane, even. She didn't have investors. She didn't come from generational wealth. No secret billionaire uncle. No magic lottery ticket. All she had was student debt, a broken heart, and an iron will. But Ava had something more valuable than money, vision. She started small. Consulting gigs. Freelance strategy plans for small black-owned businesses. She reinvested every dollar, often sleeping on her cousin's couch, eating dollar store noodles, while building 6-figure brands for others. People started to notice. "She's the real deal," they said. "Brilliant mind. Fierce work ethic. Doesn't miss deadlines." Within 2 years, Ava had launched her own boutique consulting firm, DeClaire Strategies. And she didn't just help companies grow. She made them magnetic. Her secret? She didn't just market products. She marketed purpose. But that wasn't the end game. It never was. One evening, scrolling through LinkedIn, she saw a headline. Historic marketing firm faces bankruptcy amid leadership crisis. It was the same firm that once told her she wasn't a good cultural fit. The same firm where she was rejected without a second glance. Something inside her stirred. Not revenge. Redemption. She called her mentor, a retired venture capitalist. "What if I could turn this company around?" she asked. "You'd need capital, influence, a strategy. But if anyone could do it, it's you." That night, she didn't sleep. She built a full acquisition plan, from evaluating the firm's balance sheets to mapping out a 6-month revival model. She had no room for error, only strategy. Then, she made the pitch. Banks said no, one after another. Investors smiled but declined. "You're impressive," they said, "but this company is too far gone." But finally, one woman-led fund said yes. They believed in Ava not just because of her numbers, but because of her story, her fire, her relentlessness. 6 months later, the paperwork was signed. Ava DeClaire walked back into the same glass building. This time, not as a job candidate, but as the new owner. People stared. Some jaws dropped. A few whispered. She walked past the receptionist who once barely acknowledged her, now standing up with a nervous smile. "Can I help you?" Ava smiled calmly. "Yes. I'm here for the leadership meeting. I'll be running it." And she did. With grace. With clarity. With the same vision that began on a train ride home with just a notebook and a dream. Today, that company, now rebranded under DeClaire Global, is one of the fastest-growing marketing firms in the country. Known for its inclusive hiring, diverse leadership, and mentorship programs for underrepresented youth, Ava didn't just buy a company. She rebuilt the system that once rejected her. Ava didn't waste a single moment after the acquisition. She knew the headlines would fade. The applause would quiet. And what would remain was the real work, rebuilding a company from its broken bones. The first thing she did? She walked into the boardroom and replaced the art on the walls. Not because she disliked it, but because she wanted every corner of that building to speak a new language, one of possibility. Instead of traditional portraits of the firm's old white male founders, she hung photographs of innovators of color. Women in lab coats, Black executives leading IPOs, young entrepreneurs standing in front of food trucks, tech hubs, and classrooms. When people walk in here, she said, they should see themselves. Then came the staff meetings. Ava didn't fire everyone. She studied people quietly. Who was loyal to the old toxic culture? Who was hungry for change? Who had been overlooked, just like she once was? In her first month, she promoted 3 women, 2 of them Black, into leadership positions that had been gatekept for over a decade. Not because of their race or gender, but because they were damn good at their jobs, and no one had ever seen them. Ava listens, one employee said. For the first time, we have a CEO who actually sees us. But Ava didn't stop at internal changes. She launched a campaign called Reclaim the Narrative. It was bold, emotional, risky. The campaign highlighted real stories of women and marginalized professionals who had faced rejection, but refused to stay silent. It went viral. Within weeks, Declare Global was trending. Corporations started reaching out, not just for their services, but to ask, how did you build this kind of culture? Ava smiled when she heard those questions, because culture wasn't a product for her. It was the foundation. She built a mentorship pipeline, partnering with HBCUs, community colleges, and even local high schools. Every summer, young Black girls walked into her office, wide-eyed, not to serve coffee, but to pitch strategies, shadow execs, and speak on panels. She remembered what it felt like to be the only Black woman in the room. Now, she was building a world where they'd never have to be alone again. But even success comes with shadows. One afternoon, during a quarterly review, her CFO, an older white man retained from the original leadership, slammed his pen on the table. "This visionary stuff is great," he said, "but we need real results." Ava didn't flinch. "We've increased revenue by 27% in 6 months. Staff retention is up. Client satisfaction is at a record high. What part doesn't feel real to you?" He paused. The room fell silent. And then, slowly, people started nodding. Not just out of agreement, but out of admiration. She had earned the numbers, the loyalty, the respect. And that's when Ava knew something powerful. She didn't need to prove herself anymore. She was already leading. Her story spread far beyond the industry. She was invited to speak at tech summits, leadership forums, even Ivy League classrooms. "People talk about generational wealth," she said once during a keynote. But what about generational healing? What about rewriting the story of what success looks like? Crowd stood. Tears welled. And young women of color in the audience whispered to each other, "If she can do it, so can I." But Ava wasn't chasing fame. She was chasing impact. And when the media asked her, "What was your proudest moment?" she didn't talk about the acquisition, or the millions in new contracts, or the awards. She said, "The day a 16-year-old intern told me, I never knew someone like me could be the boss. That was the day I won." Ava had gone from rejected applicant to CEO, from forgotten name on a resume to a woman reshaping an entire industry. But she remained grounded. She still answered emails personally, still remembered birthdays, still mentored young women even on her busiest days. Because for Ava, leadership wasn't about power. It was about purpose. And every time she looked at the building she now owned, once a symbol of rejection, she didn't feel bitterness. She felt gratitude. Because that rejection wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. Ava had done the impossible. She had transformed a company that once rejected her into one of the most sought-after firms in the industry. Yet, as the company soared, so did the weight of its success. For every win, there was a new challenge, a new fight that needed to be faced. The media, once skeptical of her leadership, now followed her every move. Ava had become a symbol of power and perseverance, but with that came intense scrutiny. Some praised her for redefining what leadership looked like in the corporate world. Others, however, still whispered about her unconventional approach and how it threatened the very foundations of the corporate systems they had spent decades building. One morning, Ava opened her inbox to find a scathing article published by a prominent business magazine. The headline read, "Ava DeClaire, the CEO who built an empire on the backs of diversity." The piece criticized her for what it described as a diversity-first approach that was hurting the company's bottom line. The tone was harsh, the arguments flawed, and the words cut deeper than she wanted to admit. But Ava, ever the strategist, knew that these were the battles she would have to fight. She didn't let the article shake her. Instead, she turned to her team and said, "Let's show them the numbers. Let's show them who we really are." She knew that data was the ultimate weapon. And so, she began preparing the next quarterly report, a report that would include not just the financial successes, but the human impact as well. She highlighted how the mentorship programs had empowered hundreds of young women of color, how the company's diversity initiatives had led to groundbreaking innovations, and how employee satisfaction was through the roof. But Ava's resilience wasn't just about responding to critics. It was also about staying true to her purpose in the face of increasing pressure. As her company grew, Ava had to make some difficult decisions. She had to choose between sticking with the culture she had built or embracing the demands of Wall Street investors who wanted quicker, flashier returns. Ava felt the tension constantly. Investors demanded faster growth, more profits, and a shift toward more traditional corporate practices. But Ava couldn't ignore the vision she had set for the company. A vision that wasn't just about money. It was about building a movement. A movement that prioritized people over profits, inclusivity over exclusivity. She found herself in countless meetings with investors, explaining that her strategy was about creating long-term value, not just short-term gains. "This isn't a race for the fastest dollar," she would tell them. "This is a marathon, and I'm in it for the long haul." At times, she was told to tone it down, that the company's brand was too radical. But Ava pushed forward. She refused to compromise on the values she had built DeClaire Global on. For every investor who questioned her, there were hundreds of employees who believed in her. Despite the external pressures, Ava remained focused on what truly mattered: her team. She implemented a company-wide initiative called Ava Circle, a monthly gathering where employees, regardless of their title or department, could come together and share their ideas, challenges, and dreams. It was a safe space for vulnerability, innovation, and connection. Employees looked forward to these sessions because, for once, their voices were heard at every level of the company. And it wasn't just the internal company culture that Ava was redefining. Her influence was spreading outward, beyond DeClaire Global. She started working with other companies, consulting on how to build diverse and inclusive workplaces. Ava wasn't just talking the talk anymore. She was walking the walk. And people were listening. But it wasn't all sunshine and roses. Ava had her moments of doubt. She missed the quiet life she once had, before the pressure of being a trailblazer, before the spotlight. She longed for the anonymity of being a regular employee, free from the weight of an entire industry watching her every move. One evening, as she sat alone in her office, looking out over the city, Ava reflected on how far she had come. From that painful day when she had been denied the job, to the moment she walked into the building she now owned, and now, standing at the helm of a billion-dollar empire, leading a movement for change. She realized something important. She wasn't just building a company. She was building a legacy. Her legacy wasn't about the profits she had generated or the awards she had won. It was about the people she had uplifted along the way. The women who had seen themselves in her. The young girls who now had role models to look up to. The employees who felt valued, respected, and empowered in a workplace that had once been so indifferent to their worth. The greatest challenge Ava faced was keeping the fire of her original vision alive. The bigger her company grew, the more the world wanted to pull her in different directions. But Ava never lost sight of why she had started in the first place. She was determined that Declare Global would never become just another corporation that put profits above people. And she made it clear to her team, if we stop being a company that values people more than profits, then none of this matters. It wasn't just a slogan. It was her creed. As Ava continued to lead, she found peace in knowing that she had done what so many said couldn't be done. She had redefined success. She had shattered the glass ceiling. And she had given countless others the permission to do the same. Ava Declare had been denied a job once. But in the end, she didn't just get a job. She bought the whole company and transformed it into something that would last for generations to come. Ava's success didn't just create a thriving company. It created a movement, one that sparked change far beyond the walls of Declare Global. As Ava's story gained more attention, people began to see her not just as a CEO, but as a symbol of resilience, empowerment, and transformation. For women of color, especially, Ava became a beacon of hope. She showed them that the obstacles they faced were not insurmountable. She proved that being rejected, underestimated, or overlooked didn't mean the end of their journey. It could be the beginning of something extraordinary. Ava's story reverberated across industries, inspiring countless individuals to rethink what success looked like. Leaders from various sectors reached out to her for advice. Startup founders, entrepreneurs, and activists wanted to know how they could channel their inner strength to break through the barriers that held them back. Ava knew the responsibility that came with this newfound platform. She didn't shy away from the spotlight, but instead, she used it to advocate for structural change in corporate America. The issues that had once plagued her, like racial inequality, gender discrimination, and the lack of opportunities for marginalized groups, were now the issues she was working to fix. She began speaking at industry conferences, telling her story not just to inspire, but to call for action. She spoke about the importance of diversity and inclusion in leadership, emphasizing that companies could no longer afford to ignore these critical factors if they wanted to survive in the modern world. But Ava wasn't just preaching. She was showing everyone how it could be done. She began implementing mentorship programs for young women of color, giving them a platform to showcase their talents. She also created partnerships with universities to offer internships and training programs aimed at helping underrepresented communities break into industries that had traditionally been closed off to them. Despite her growing influence, Ava's success was met with resistance from some quarters. The corporate world, while beginning to recognize her as a force, still had deep-rooted biases that made it difficult for many women like her to thrive. Ava knew she had to keep fighting, but she also knew that change would take time. There were moments when she felt overwhelmed, moments when the weight of her responsibilities seemed too heavy to bear. There were days when she questioned if her efforts were truly making a difference, or if she was simply swimming against the current. But Ava refused to back down. For every setback, she came back stronger. She surrounded herself with a team that shared her vision, a team that was just as passionate about creating lasting change as she was. She built a support system that kept her grounded, reminding her that she wasn't in this alone. As she continued to expand Declare Global's reach, Ava started to notice something remarkable. The company wasn't just making waves in the corporate world, it was inspiring communities. Schools and local organizations began using Declare Global as a case study on how to successfully integrate diversity into their own operations. Teachers were using her story as a lesson on perseverance and determination, showing students that their backgrounds and challenges didn't define their future. Ava had unknowingly become an educator, teaching an entire generation the value of persistence and the importance of building an inclusive, equitable world. One of the proudest moments of Ava's career came when Declare Global was invited to collaborate with a nonprofit organization focused on empowering young women from underprivileged backgrounds. The project aimed to provide scholarships, mentorship, and internships for women who had been overlooked by traditional corporate pathways. The organization was inspired by Ava's journey and saw Declare Global as the perfect partner in its mission. Together, they launched a groundbreaking initiative that would go on to change the lives of hundreds of young women. Through this program, Declare Global offered a platform for those who had once been overlooked, helping them develop skills, build networks, and most importantly, realize their worth. Ava didn't just build a company. She built a legacy of empowerment, opportunity, and hope for people who had been left behind by the system. But Ava's influence didn't stop there. As she looked out at the diverse faces of her employees, mentors, and collaborators, she knew that her work was far from done. Every success, every breakthrough, every moment of victory wasn't just a personal win. It was a step closer to achieving her ultimate goal, to create a world where everyone, regardless of their race, gender, or background, had the opportunity to thrive. Ava's legacy wasn't about just changing one company. It was about changing the world, one opportunity at a time. And she had no intention of stopping. The ripple effect of Ava's success was clear. She had not only bought the company that once rejected her, she had transformed an entire industry. Through her leadership, advocacy, and dedication, Ava had proven that a single person could ignite a wave of change, and, in the process, reshape the future. Her journey had come full circle, from rejection to redemption, from outsider to trailblazer. Ava DeClaire wasn't just a success story. She was a movement in motion. Ava DeClaire's journey had been anything but easy. She had been told no, turned away, and shut out at every turn, yet she had never given up. Now, as she looked at the empire she had built, not just a company, but a movement, she knew one thing for certain. Her journey had only just begun. As the CEO of DeClaire Global, Ava had achieved everything she set out to do, and more. She had not only transformed a struggling company into a thriving empire, but she had also fundamentally shifted the way the world saw women, people of color, and those who had once been overlooked by corporate America. Her story had become a blueprint for anyone who had ever felt marginalized, proving that with perseverance, vision, and unwavering belief in oneself, anything was possible. But Ava's true success didn't just lie in the numbers or accolades. It was in the lives she had touched. The women she had mentored, the communities she had helped, and the countless individuals who had looked at her and found the courage to chase their dreams. Her story was no longer just her own. It was the story of thousands who found strength in her resilience and were inspired by her tenacity. Ava understood that her success wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a collective victory. She had opened doors that had once been locked and given people the opportunity to walk through them. Through her leadership, DeClaire Global had become a platform for change, a company that didn't just chase profits, but actively worked toward building a more inclusive and fair society. As Ava stood at the forefront of her empire, surrounded by a diverse team of talented, passionate individuals, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. DeClaire Global had become a place where everyone had a seat at the table, regardless of their background or identity. It had become a beacon of what was possible when people were given the opportunity to succeed on their own terms. Ava's success wasn't about beating the system. It was about changing the system from the inside out. She had dismantled the structures that once kept people like her on the outside, and in their place, she had built something new, something more inclusive, something more equitable. As the years passed, Ava continued to push boundaries, but she never lost sight of what had gotten her here in the first place. She remained deeply connected to the core values that had guided her from the start: resilience, integrity, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserved the opportunity to reach their full potential. Her work, however, was far from done. Ava knew that while progress had been made, the fight for equality, opportunity, and justice was ongoing. She continued to use her platform to amplify the voices of the underdogs, to challenge the status quo, and to advocate for systemic changes in education, corporate policy, and social structures. Through her work, Ava became a global advocate for change, sitting at the tables of influential organizations and international bodies, where she used her voice to champion policies that would level the playing field for future generations. Her advocacy went beyond just the business world. It extended into every area of life, from politics to social justice, from education to healthcare. Ava had become a force for good, a leader who saw the big picture and worked tirelessly to create a world that was fair, just, and full of opportunities for all. But even as her influence grew, Ava never lost sight of the most important lesson she had learned along the way. Success isn't about what you achieve for yourself. It's about what you do for others. She understood that the true measure of success was not in the wealth or accolades you accumulated, but in the impact you had on the lives of others. And Ava's impact was profound. She was invited to speak at conferences around the world, sharing her story and her message with audiences far and wide. People who had once been told they couldn't achieve their dreams now looked to her for guidance, and she was more than happy to share her knowledge, wisdom, and experience. Ava's story continued to inspire future generations of women, people of color, and anyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough. Her legacy was etched into the fabric of the corporate world, but more importantly, it was etched into the hearts of those who had walked in her shoes, and those who had yet to take their first step. As Ava DeClaire gazed at the future she had helped create, she couldn't help but smile. She had done it. Against all odds, she had bought the company that rejected her, transformed it into something extraordinary, and in doing so, had built a better world for everyone who came after her. Her work was not over, but the foundation she had laid would continue to grow and inspire long after she had moved on to her next chapter. Ava DeClaire had created more than just a business. She had created a movement, a legacy, a testament to the power of resilience, determination, and the belief that nothing is impossible. The world had changed, and it had changed because of one woman who refused to take no for an answer.